I spent 31 years reading people for a living. As a detective with the Columbus Police Department, I prided myself on spotting a lie before the second sentence. I could sit across from a man who'd done something terrible and not guess. Know within the first 3 minutes. My captain used to joke that I had a built-in polygraph where other men had a conscience. What he never told me, and what I never figured out until it was almost too late, is that the machine stops working entirely when the person sitting across from you is someone you love. My son called on a Wednesday morning in early November, which should have been my first clue. My son was not a Wednesday morning phone caller. He was a Sunday evening text message person, at best. Brief, practical, usually about something he needed. Hey Dad, do you remember where you put the title to the Chevy? Hey Dad, did Mom keep a copy of the homeowner's insurance anywhere? That kind of thing. Not bad questions, just never warm ones. So when my phone rang at 9 in the morning and his name appeared on the screen, I felt something lift in my chest. A stupid, hopeful thing. Dad, he said. And his voice had that lightness in it I hadn't heard since before his mother passed. I've been thinking. We haven't done anything together in forever. Just the two of us. What do you say I come up from Cincinnati on Friday? We grab lunch at Marcello's. That Italian place downtown you always liked. My treat. Marcello's. Margaret and I had eaten there every anniversary for 19 years. Red-checked tablecloths. Bread that came out too hot to hold. Candles even at lunch. He knew what that place meant to me. I'd like that, I said. Great. A pause. Then, I also figured we could swing by my friend's office after. He does estate planning. I know it's not the most fun topic, but since Mom's been gone almost 2 years, it's probably time to make sure everything's squared away. Nothing major. Just a review. There it was, tucked into the back of a sentence like a footnote. But I was so caught off guard by the invitation itself, by the warmth in his voice, by the thought of sitting at Marcello's with my son, that I let it slide past me. Sure, I said. That makes sense. After we hung up, I sat for a while in the kitchen. The house on Meridian Street was quiet the way it had been quiet for 22 months. The kind of quiet that has texture, weight. Margaret's reading glasses were still on the kitchen counter. I couldn't explain why I hadn't moved them. Some part of me felt that if I moved them, I was agreeing to something I wasn't ready to agree to. My son had his father's jaw and his mother's eyes. Growing up, he'd been everything a man could hope for in a boy. Baseball games on Saturday mornings, staying up too late watching westerns together, the two of us fixing the back porch one summer when Margaret kept threatening to fall through it. He'd been a good kid, a little impatient, a little hungry for things, but good. Then he married Kristen. I want to be careful here, because I am not a man who blames a woman for what a man chooses to do. But I will say this. Kristen had expensive taste and a practical mind, and the two of those things together made for a kind of math that never quite balanced. They lived well beyond what his sales job at the software company should have allowed. The house in Hyde Park, the leased Audi, the vacations to places that required a passport. I'd asked Margaret about it once, gently, and she'd looked at me with that patient expression she had. Don't borrow trouble, Robert. Margaret had always been the wiser one. She died on a Tuesday in January. Heart attack. Sudden. No warning. One moment she was in the garden, pulling dead stalks from her rose beds, and then she was on the ground, and then she was gone. The paramedics said she likely felt nothing. I have tried very hard to believe them. My son had driven up from Cincinnati and been everything a son should be in those first terrible weeks. He'd handled the funeral arrangements, spoken beautifully at the service, sat with me through the long evenings when the house felt unbearable. I had been grateful. I still am, for that part, but somewhere around the 3-month mark, the visits slowed. The calls got shorter. He started showing up only when he needed information about accounts, about policies, about what exactly Mom had left. I told myself that was grief, too. That people process loss by trying to control the practical things around it. I had seen that in 31 years of other people's worst days. I made excuses. That is what I am saying. Friday came with cold gray November sky. My son arrived at the house looking sharp in a charcoal coat I didn't recognize. He hugged me at the door, which he rarely did, and I thought, see, things are getting better. We drove downtown in his Audi, and he talked easily about his work, about a project he was proud of, about some trip he and Kristen were planning in the spring. He was relaxed in a way he hadn't been in months. I remember thinking he seemed almost relieved. Marcello's was exactly as I remembered. The owner, Tony, recognized me from before and shook my hand and said something kind about Margaret. My son watched this exchange with a small, tight smile that I didn't analyze at the time. We ate well. The bread came out too hot and I burned my fingertips on it, and my son laughed. A real laugh. And for a while I forgot about the estate planning office and just enjoyed having my boy across the table from me. Over espresso, he mentioned his friend's name again. A man named Garrett. Office right off High Street. Very easy to get to from here. How long will it take? I asked. Shouldn't be more than an hour. Garrett's great, very straightforward. He'll just walk us through where things stand with the house, the accounts, make sure the paperwork reflects what you actually want. Mom would have wanted things organized. Mom would have wanted. He used that phrase the way a key fits a lock. All right, I said. We drove 3 blocks east. The building was glass and chrome, the kind of downtown office that always makes me feel slightly underdressed. There was a bank branch on the ground floor. First Midland, same bank where Margaret and I had kept our accounts for 30 years, and above it, 2 floors of legal offices. My son went to check in at a reception desk near the elevator. I drifted toward the bank branch entrance out of habit, the way you drift toward something familiar in an unfamiliar place. Through the glass door, I could see the teller windows. I had a thought about stopping in to ask about something on the account. Some automatic withdrawal I'd noticed that I hadn't gotten around to calling about. So, I stepped inside. There were 2 tellers working. The one nearest me was a woman in her 50s, reading glasses pushed up on her head, the kind of steady face that belongs to someone who has seen a great many things without being surprised by them. Her nameplate read Patricia. She glanced up when I approached. Good morning. Can I help you? Good morning. I just had a quick question about my account. Robert Callahan. I noticed an automatic withdrawal I didn't recognize about 6 weeks ago. She typed, looked at her screen, and her expression shifted. Not dramatically, just a small tightening around the eyes that I recognized immediately, because I had done exactly that myself across 31 years of interrogation rooms when something on a file didn't match what I expected. Mr. Callahan, she said carefully. Could I ask, are you here alone today? I looked back through the glass door at the lobby. My son was still at the reception desk, back to me, talking to the woman behind the counter. My son is with me, I said. He's just checking us in upstairs. Patricia looked at her screen again. She leaned slightly forward and lowered her voice in a way that was not subtle but was intentional. Are you here today to sign any documents related to your home equity or your accounts? The hair on my arms stood up. 31 years of instinct firing at once. Why would you ask me that? She glanced over my shoulder at the lobby, then back at me. Sir, I probably shouldn't say this, but there has been an inquiry on your account. About a week ago, someone called in asking about the process for adding a cosigner to your home equity line of credit and about the current balance on your mortgage. They had your account number. Who called? She hesitated. The call was made from a number registered to a Kristen Mallory Callahan, my daughter-in-law. There's something else, Patricia continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I have a client, an older gentleman. Comes in every month. Last spring, his son brought him here, to this building, upstairs, said it was to update his beneficiary forms. By the time we flagged it, he'd signed a co-borrower agreement that gave his son access to draw against his home equity. He didn't know what he was signing. He thought it was insurance paperwork. She looked at me steadily. He lost 40 years of equity. He's 74. The room was very still. His son brought him here, I repeated. To this building. Same attorney. She said the name quietly. Garrett. I had spent 3 decades learning the difference between a coincidence and a pattern. This was not a coincidence. Thank you, I said. My voice came out calmer than I felt. Old habits. I walked back through the glass door into the lobby. My son was still at the reception desk and turned when he heard me. There you are. We're all set. Garrett can see us now. Elevator's right. I need to use the restroom first, I said. My back's been acting up. Give me 10 minutes. He looked at his watch. A flicker of something impatience, maybe something else, crossed his face. Sure, yeah. Down the hall, I think. I walked down the hall. I did not go to the restroom. I went to the exit at the end of the corridor, the one marked for employees that led to the parking garage, and I pushed through it and kept walking. The November cold hit me hard. I was still in my dress shirt from lunch. I walked 2 blocks without stopping, then leaned against a concrete pillar in an outdoor parking structure and called an Uber and stood there watching my hands shake. My son had brought me to the same building, the same attorney, that had already destroyed one old man's life. The Uber driver was a young man who said nothing beyond Mr. Callahan, and I was grateful for that. I sat in the back seat and tried to organize my thoughts the way I had learned to do in 31 years of sitting with terrible information. What do I actually know? I know Kristen called the bank about my accounts. I know Garrett has done this before. I know my son arranged today's visit and framed it as a casual favor. I know Margaret said, "Don't borrow trouble." Robert, but Margaret also knew things she didn't always say out loud. That last thought pulled at something. When I got home, I went straight to the bedroom closet. On the top shelf, behind a row of Margaret's sweaters that I still hadn't been able to give away, was the metal box where she kept what she called the real paperwork. The documents that actually mattered. Not the copies in the filing cabinet downstairs. The originals. Margaret had been methodical about everything. 35 years as an office manager for a civil engineering firm will do that to a person. She had a system for every piece of paper that entered the house. I had always found this slightly excessive. I found it to be the most important thing she ever did for me. I pulled the box down and set it on the bed. The key was on her keychain, which was in the nightstand where I had left it after the hospital. I unlocked the box and went through it carefully. The deed to the house, both our names, then just mine, updated properly after she passed. Good. Life insurance, already settled. Retirement accounts. Beneficiary forms, both dated 3 years ago. Both listed Robert James Callahan, spouse, but she had added a handwritten note stapled to the corner of the second form. Updated with financial advisor, Sept 2022. Call Carol Newen at Heartland if anything seems wrong. I didn't know what that meant yet. I kept looking. At the bottom of the box, beneath a copy of her mother's estate documents, was a sealed envelope with my name on the front in Margaret's handwriting. Below my name, in smaller letters, "Open. If something feels wrong." I sat on the edge of the bed for a long moment. Then I opened it. "Robert, if you're reading this, something happened, and I wasn't there to warn you in person, which I'm sorry for. About 8 months ago, I got a call from our son. He told me he and Kristen were in trouble financially. Bad trouble. He didn't want to worry you. He asked whether we'd thought about letting them refinance the house, putting their names on it, so they could access the equity as a safety net. He said it would be on paper only, that they would never actually use it, that it was just a precaution. I said no. He asked me not to tell you. I said no to that too. After I hung up, I called Carol Nguyen and had everything we own reviewed and locked down as tightly as legally possible. The house title is correct. The accounts have verbal confirmation required for any changes Carol can explain. I also spoke to my attorney, Janet Moser. Her number is in the address book under M. Our son is not a bad person. I believe that. But he is a desperate one. And he married someone who is willing to do things he would not do alone. That combination worries me more than either one separately. I love him. But I love you more. Forgive me for keeping this secret. I kept it because I wanted you to have one more good year without this weight. Take care of the roses. You always underwater them. All my love. Always, Maggie. I read it twice. Then I set it down on the bedspread very carefully, as though it were fragile, and I pressed both hands flat against my knees and breathed. My wife had known. She had spent what turned out to be the last year of her life, quietly building walls around me, and she had never said a word. My phone had been buzzing since I got home. I looked at it now. 4 texts from my son. The first was casual. "Hey, where'd you go?" The second was concerned. "Dad, are you okay? Did something happen?" The third was slightly harder. "I drove by the house. Your car is here. Please let me know you're okay." The fourth, sent 20 minutes ago, said, "I'm coming over." I had maybe 40 minutes. I called the number Janet Moser had left on her voicemail greeting. Her assistant picked up and I explained who I was and that I believed my son was planning to present me with fraudulent documents. She put me on hold for 90 seconds and then Janet Moser herself came on the line, and within 5 minutes I understood that Margaret had already briefed her attorney on exactly this possibility. Janet Moser was not surprised. She was also not unprepared. "Mrs. Callahan asked me to reach out to her contact at the Franklin County Economic Crimes Unit if this situation ever arose," she said. "I'd like to conference in Detective Angela Reyes right now, if that's all right with you." I had been a detective for 31 years. I knew exactly what came next. "Do it," I said. Detective Reyes was direct and calm. She told me that Garrett, the attorney my son had brought me to, had been under investigation for 8 months, 4 previous cases, elderly clients, family members as co-conspirators, documents, disguised as standard estate updates. 3 of the 4 victims had not realized what they'd signed for weeks afterward, by which point the transactions had processed. "Your son's name has come up in our investigation," she said. "Kristen Callahan's name has come up more. We believe she is the primary driver. Your son may be cooperative if approached correctly." I thought about the boy who had stayed up late watching westerns with me. Then I thought about the man who had ordered me the wine I liked at Marcello's 3 hours ago, while knowing what was waiting upstairs. "What do you need from me?" I asked. She told me. My son knocked on the front door at 4:17 p.m. I had the recording device taped to my ribs, where I had taped similar devices to other men on dozens of occasions. It felt smaller than I remembered. I opened the door. "Dad, what happened?" I was worried sick. He came inside before I fully stepped aside, scanning the room the way I recognized, the way a person scans when they're checking on something specific and trying to look like they're checking on you. "I wasn't feeling well," I said. "I should have called." "You should have." "We had an appointment, Dad." Garrett rescheduled his whole afternoon. He took off his coat and set it on the chair, the one Margaret used to sit in to read. I noticed him do that and felt something quiet and cold settle in my chest. "Look, let's just reschedule. It won't be a big deal. Next Friday, or even early next week." What exactly was I going to be signing today? He met my eyes without flinching. He had his mother's eyes, and right now they were unreadable. Just estate updates, beneficiary changes, making sure the house is structured correctly. Structured correctly how? In a way that makes sense going forward. For tax purposes, for everyone's protection. Whose protection? He paused. "Dad, are you feeling all right? Have you eaten enough today?" "Sometimes, when your blood sugar—" "Don't," I said. The word came out the way it had come out 31 years of interrogation rooms. Final. Flat. Not loud. He stopped. "I spoke to Patricia at First Midland today," I said. "She told me Kristen called about my home equity line. About adding a co-signer." A beat of silence. His jaw tightened slightly. "Kristen was just trying to understand the options. It was research. I read your mother's letter. Whatever he had been preparing to say next didn't come." He stood very still. "She wrote it 8 months before she died," I said. "She knew what you asked her. She knew you wanted the house. She also knew you well enough to lock everything down before she left, in case I was too blind to see it myself." I looked at him, which I was. "Dad, Garrett has done this before. 4 other families. Did you know that? Or did Kristen handle that part, and you just drove the car?" His face went through something complicated. Anger first, then something that looked almost like relief. The way a person looks when they've been holding something too heavy for too long. "You don't know what it's been like," he said, and his voice cracked slightly at the end. "You and Mom, You bought this house for $80,000. Do you understand what that's worth now? Do you understand that I make $120,000 a year and I cannot afford a two-bedroom house in the city where I grew up? Kristen's student loans alone are $3,800 a month. We are drowning. We have been drowning for 3 years, and I couldn't tell you because you would have looked at me exactly the way you're looking at me right now. Like what? Like I failed. The room was quiet. I had looked at suspects for 31 years, and I had learned to separate what was true from what was convenient. What my son had just said was true. I could hear the years of pressure in it, the specific shame of a man who believes his father measures him and finds him short. That was real. It was also not the whole truth. You were going to take this house, I said. Your mother's house. The place she spent 35 years. You were going to put it up as collateral for your debts without telling me what I was signing. And then if the debts didn't clear, I would have lost it. He looked at the floor. Garrett has 4 victims right now, I said. The man before me was 74 years old. He has nothing left. Is that who you are? Is that what Kristen talked you into becoming? It was supposed to be a loan, he said quietly. We were going to pay it back. That's what they all say. I know because I spent 31 years listening to people tell me what it was supposed to be. He looked up at me then, and he looked young suddenly. Younger than 38. Young the way he had looked when he was 12 years old and had crashed his bicycle into Mrs. Henderson's fence and sat in the kitchen not looking at me, waiting to find out how much trouble he was in. What happens now? He asked. Detective Angela Reyes will be here in about 20 minutes, I said. She's going to want to talk to you about Garrett, about what you know, about the other clients, about Kristen's involvement. If you cooperate fully, honestly, she believes the prosecutor may consider a different path than fraud and elder abuse charges. He stared at me. You called the police. I was a police officer for 31 years. What did you think I would do? He sat down on the couch, not in his mother's chair. He had the grace for that, at least. I'm sorry, Dad. He set it to his hands, folded in his lap. I know that doesn't. It doesn't fix anything, I said. But I hear you. We sat in silence for 11 minutes until the knock at the door. Detective Reyes was younger than I expected and sharper than she sounded on the phone. She spoke to my son quietly and carefully, and I went to the kitchen and stood by the back window looking out at Margaret's rose beds, brown and sleeping in November the way they always were, the way they always came back in April, whether I remembered to water them or not. I thought about what I would say to him after this. Not tonight, not for a while, but eventually. I was still working out whether there were words for it. What I kept coming back to was a version of my son I still believed was in there somewhere. The boy at the baseball games. The boy who had read every word of his mother's eulogy without looking at the page because he had memorized it, because he had loved her that much. That boy had made a series of wrong choices, partly on his own and partly because he had married someone who was better at justifying wrong choices than he was. And now, he was going to have to live with that. So was I. Garrett was arrested the following Tuesday. The investigation moved quickly once my son began cooperating, and he cooperated completely. He told them everything: names, dates, documents, the mechanics of how the scheme worked, how Kristen had found Garrett through a financial forum online, how it had started as a desperate idea and became something neither of them had fully looked at directly until it was already in motion. Kristen was arrested on Wednesday. She said nothing without her attorney present, which was her right. I had no feeling about Kristen one way or the other that I could clearly identify. I am still working on that. My son was charged with conspiracy to commit financial fraud. With his cooperation, the prosecutor offered a plea: 2 years of supervised release, restitution, mandatory financial counseling, no prison time, contingent on continued cooperation, and full restitution paid to the 4 previous victims. He called me after the plea hearing. I let it go to voicemail. I listened to the message 3 times. Dad, I know you probably don't want to hear from me right now. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I met with 2 of the families this week, the ones Garrett's victims. I don't know if there's a word for what that felt like. I don't think I deserve a word for it. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I was part of, and I'm going to spend a long time making it right. I love you. I know that probably sounds hollow right now. I just... Long pause. I know Mom would have said something better than this. I'm sorry I'm not better at this. I'll keep trying. I called him back the next morning. The conversation was not easy, and it was not warm, and it did not resolve anything. But it lasted 45 minutes, which was longer than any phone call we had managed in 3 years. And at the end of it, I told him that his mother had believed he was fundamentally good, and that she was not often wrong about people, and that the door to this house would be open when he was ready to walk through it. But that ready had a specific definition, and it included doing the work he had committed to doing, and not a minute sooner. He said, I understand. I believed him. I am still deciding if that is wise. The house on Meridian Street is quieter than it should be for a man of 67. I have been told this by my brother in Phoenix, and by a few friends from the department who check in more than I expected. I appreciate the checking in. I tell them I am fine, which is partly true and partly the kind of answer you give when the full answer would take too long. What is true is this. I still have the house. I still have the mortgage that Margaret and I paid down together over 30 years. I still have the rose beds, and I have been watering them correctly. I looked it up, which Margaret would have found funny. I found the old westerns we used to watch, my son and I, on a streaming service I didn't know I had. Some nights, I put one on and sit in the armchair and watch it and think about the man he could still become. The person his mother believed was in there, underneath the debt and the bad decisions and the years of wanting things he didn't know how to earn. I do not know if she was right. But Margaret was right about most things, and she left me every tool I needed to survive the things she was afraid I couldn't survive. And she did it quietly and without making me feel like I needed protecting, which was exactly the right way to protect me. I found her reading glasses this morning and moved them to the windowsill above the kitchen sink, where she used to leave them when she was working in the garden. Not putting them away, just moving them somewhere that made sense. Some days that is the most a man can do. He called again last Sunday. Said he had started meeting with a financial counselor and that he and Kristen were separating. He said it without self-pity, just as information, the way a person states something they have accepted. He asked if he could come to Columbus at Christmas. Not to stay, just for dinner, if that was something I could consider. I said I would think about it. I am thinking about it.